all kinds of animals in that vein. And so the word herpetology, it means, herp comes from the word creeping animal in Greek. And then ology is the study of. So it is, the branch of zoology concerned with the study of amphibians, including frogs, toads, salamanders, newts, and reptiles, including snakes, lizards, turtles, terrapins, tortoises, crocodilians, and the tuataras. So we're going to just kind of go over a little bit on their family, bit of characteristics that these animals share or don't share, and then we're going to go through some of the common ones that are here in Placerita Canyon. What is something, when you hear reptile or amphibian, what's like the one thing you think sets them apart from other animals, or what's a thing that's unique to them? Cold-blooded, yes. Scales, yeah. Eggs, yep. I'm trying to think of the other ones. Yep, eggs. And on that tree that we looked at last week, we're going to be focusing on amphibians and alligators. So quite a different branch than the arthropods that we did last week. But yes, this is where we're going to go, and then you'll move into birds and mammals. We don't have any fish here, so we're not really going to talk about them. So they're vertebrates. So unlike the arthropods from last week, these guys have a backbone. In fact, snakes are like all backbone. Even frogs, this is a frog skeleton that's really weird looking. It's funny, I saw like one of those Halloween frogs. Somebody's like, that one looks more like a frog than the real thing. And actually, frogs don't even have ribs because they're got to make room for all that stomach. And that's a Komodo dragon. Oh, and feel free to raise your hand, shout out, whatever. It's kind of more of a conversation than me just presenting. Yes?
Is it possible for us to move this table so that you can stand there so that I can see?
Oh, my gosh. Yes, okay.
Thank you.
There we go. I'm going to be probably bouncing back and forth too. So yes, they're all vertebrates. They've all got a backbone, just like birds and mammals do, but very different group. Yes, ectothermic, cold-blooded. We mammals are endothermic, so we're able to regulate our own body temperature based on food that we get energy from. Reptiles can't do that, and they basically are the temperature of the air and space around them, which works out positively for them in that they require a lot less food than us. We have to eat like 3 or 4 times a day. They can eat every other week or so. Some of them, mostly snakes. But because they have that different body metabolism, they don't need to eat as much. And so that's why first thing in the morning, you'll sometimes see lizards and snakes out. They call it basking. When they're hanging out on a rock like this one, he's like super comfortable with his legs just there. And nighttime, they also bask as well, not with the sun, but with the warmed rocks and ground they can kind of warm up on. In fact, that's why you'll see a lot of times snakes at night on roads, because that asphalt is super warm. So this is a little Mojave rattlesnake that was warming himself up. So even at nighttime, they still can get heat from the residual heat from the day.
Range of temperature from the lowest to the highest required for them to live?
It varies species to species, but probably they're most active between, I'd say, like 70 degrees to like 90. It actually will get too hot for them. Like a misconception is, it's 110. There's got to be so many snakes out there loving it. No, they're not. They're just like you. They're going under a rock and staying out of that heat. So when it's around like 80, 85, 90, that's kind of like a nice, good, sweet spot.
Sneak a quick comment in.
Yes, yeah.
2 people didn't sign in, so make sure at the break you sign in so I can keep track of you. Not now, for this work.
Olivia, what about the snake's body temperature? Around here, what would a typical, nighttime snake temperature be versus, let's say, in the middle of the summer in the day?
Like at night right now, or spring?
What the range of the internal temperature of the snake?
Probably like 70 to 85, 90.
So a lot like the air.
Yeah, yeah, it's basically the air. I should have brought it. I have a little like laser temperature gun that you point it at something and it'll tell you the temperature. I use it for my reptiles at home, and I'll sometimes aim it on like their back and be like, oh, here, this temperature. Your warm spot of the enclosure is 85, your cold is 72. Okay, you can kind of go between that. So yeah, that variation in temperature, they basically are constantly moving to get that sweet spot temperature that they want. Yes?
So when it gets to be freezing at night, they go hide in warm spots?
Yeah,
somewhere?
yeah.
You know
They,
where those warm spots are?
it's not really warm. In fact, that's what we're going to move to next is, yeah, since it gets cold, they can't be out scooting around. Like today it might be warm enough, but still pretty cool. And they go through a period called, oh, yes.
Sorry, I had a quick question.
Uh-huh.
I remember reading, I don't know if it's true, so that's why I'm asking. There are some toads and frogs in the north who will physically freeze
Yes.
sometimes and just like stay there completely frozen during winter, and then it thaws, or it gets warm and they thaw and they just kind of keep going along.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes, that is true.
That's nuts.
I don't know a whole bunch about them, but I do remember reading that and hearing about it. They have like a special thing in their body that allows them to just freeze solid. Most reptiles do not have that advantage, but yeah, they'll. That's amazing that they'll just freeze, like, and not be dead. Like, they're pretty. Yeah, there's a lot of cool.
Frozen, huh? Hibernate while frozen.
Yeah, yeah. Most of them don't do that, and so the technical term, like, for hibernation with reptiles is brumation. So it's a little different. Hibernation's more like just full-on hard. I'm asleep. I am out. Wake me when it's warmer. Brumation, they're kind of just really slowed down. They're not really with it, but they're not like in a deep sleep like hibernation with mammals. Sometimes when it's warm, they'll come out and kind of eat, drink, and then they'll just go back into their burrow. So yeah, rock crevices, leaf litter, sometimes under people's houses. There's videos of like these people be like, oh my God, there's like 20 rattlesnakes in my basement. That's because they were like, oh, let's stay here for the winter. And they'll go in just a big pile. And sometimes, yeah, it's a bunch will brumate together. So this is a desert tortoise and a sidewinder rattlesnake. And they're just sleeping in the same burrow, which is kind of, I'll get back into it more with when we talk about tortoises, but their burrows are super important because it kind of becomes a condo for a lot of animals. And if it gets too hot, they'll also it's called estivation. They'll take shelter and just wait till it cools down even. Yes?
I've grown up with lizards.
Uh-huh.
As a kid, we always I've had lizards that get stuck in a water bucket.
Mm-hmm.
They head out for plants, and they're half in, half out of the water, and they just look dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll take them and I'll tuck them inside my shirt,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually they start moving, and I just let them go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Warm them up a little bit.
Yeah, when they're in that state, they're just vulnerable. Yeah, they'll look dead and something could just be like, oh, I'm just going to eat this. So, yeah, there's nothing they can do. They can't move. They're just like, I'm not warm enough to do it. But yeah, I've done that where warm them up and kind of then they'll start exploring. Like sometimes like some of our animal ambassador snakes, I'll pick them up and first they'll be kind of lethargic. Then they get my body heat and then they're like, woo, and I'm like, and then they're all over me. Yes?
For those of you that want to show a snake or bring steaks out from the back, when you go in and get them, sometimes they're very cold to the touch. And they're very easy to pick up and handle. But they'll immediately wrap around your arm and take the warmth from your arm. They don't panic when they do that. They don't squeeze. They're just trying to get warm.
Yeah, you're like a nice warm rock to them. So yeah, they really like that. Shedding. So that's another thing that reptiles and amphibians do. We shed too. Birds shed. All of us shed. And if you have a pet, you know that they shed their hair like crazy. Birds will molt once or twice a year and get brand new feathers. And reptiles and amphibians do the same thing, except there's typically will be one big thing that just comes off. It can be in pieces, like this lizard was in the middle of shedding and little bits were coming off. Or with snakes, they basically slide. They start with their face. If you ever see one of the snakes here, like rubbing against rocks to get that shed off. Once they start it, it goes over their head like a hoodie, and they just slide right out of it like an old sock. In fact, our gopher snake there has a shed. And let me show you, I have another shed that's really big. So it's kind of crunchy. This is from a Western diamond rattlesnake that belongs to our animal keeper. Actually, so yeah, that's a good point. There's no rattle on this. And that's because that rattle stays with the snake. So they get a new little rattle button every time they shed. So yeah, we'll get more into that with the rattlesnakes. But another thing you'll notice with this one, there's little eyes caps on it. I don't know if it really shows with this one. Oh, yeah. But snakes don't have eyelids, which is one of the things that discerns them from lizards. And they'll shed that eye cap as well. So they'll have these like little goggles going on when they shed. Yes?
So snakes has bones, right?
Yes.
Because I hear that they don't have bones.
Nope, they've got bones. Yeah. Yeah, actually, let me grab my other cool thing. So this is doesn't have the ribs, but this is a vertebrae from a snake. So they're all backbone. But yeah, normally they would have the ribs and then a little skull on the end, but this is just to show they have a lot more bones than a lot of creatures actually.
Is that a real one?
Yes. Yeah, I got this one a long time ago.
Excuse me, sorry.
Yes.
Do all lizards have eyelids, or is it just most of them are?
Most. There's always there's these rules for what makes a lizard and a snake, but there's always little exceptions. So we're going to talk about a few lizards that, same thing, don't have eyelids. Amphibians, I'm sure no one's really seen an amphibian shedding their skin. They do it pretty quick, and because their skin is kind of wet and slimy, it just kind of comes off like one big booger, basically, is kind of how I've heard it described. And they eat it right away. They're just like, oh, nope, it's gone. I need that nutrition and that moisture back. So they just recycle it back in. And when snakes and lizards shed and they get that new skin underneath, they're always super bright, super pretty, really just vibrant looking. And before they shed, you'll really notice it in some of the snakes here. Their eyes will be kind of a cloudy blue. So people refer to it, oh, they're in blue. And yeah, they're about to shed. They'll get that sort of hazy look, then it'll go away, and then they'll shed. So it's kind of like this period. And you really typically don't want to handle them too much because they can't see very well. So they're kind of a little on guard. They're vulnerable. So some snakes will be like, oh no, I can't see. They might be a little more reactive and defensive if you pick them up when they can't see what's going on. Yes?
So they do this when they grow, right?
Yes.
But once they reach their full growth, do they stop shedding?
No, they'll still shed, just less often, and they won't grow as much. So I have a little baby king snake, and she's shedding at least once a month because she's growing. And versus like an adult, we have an adult king snake at Vasquez Rocks, and he sheds like every once in a while, not super common because he's full grown. And it depends on how they're eating. So you can't really determine exactly the age because if it's, say, a snake or a lizard that's somewhere where, oh, it's the perfect habitat. They're eating all the things. They're growing fast versus one that might be not in the best location, not eating quite as frequently, and will be small even though it'll be the same age as, say, another one in a better habitat where they're eating well.
My iguana, when she was growing, because I got her when she was this big.
Oh.
She was 3 feet when she finally grew, but as she was shedding,
Mm-hmm.
the whole growth time, she would get kind of crabby.
Yeah, it's very itchy. Yeah, it's not comfortable. Same with birds when they're molting their feathers. Like you could tell they're not in a good mood. It's very uncomfortable. Kind of a gross comparison. Have any of you ever done one of those like foot peel things. You put your foot in like this little bag, and something in there kind of helps your skin, and then 3 days later you're peeling just like this. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. I did it once and I'm like, nope. Yeah, baby feet, that's what it's called. So yeah, you could feel what it's like to be a lizard on your feet if you ever do one of those. Yeah, it was uncomfortable to walk when I did that, so that's why I never did it again. Yes?
One of the things that she was pointing out is about how they eat. That depends on their growth. At Eden Canyon, they donated a baby gopher snake. It was 2 weeks old.
Oh.
And its brothers and sisters were kept at a different location. When they came to do a presentation, they brought them. The ones that they had, I'm not exaggerating, were 5 times the size as the one that we kept.
Oh my gosh.
And
So you didn't feed her?
yeah, they didn't feed her. Yeah, well, I came over here. Because I was instructed to feed when they're babies, that give them pinkies as if they want it, feed them. Feed them. And so instead of like full-grown snakes that get fed approximately twice a week, once every 2 weeks, right? Approximately.
Yeah, my baby was every other week for all the adult snakes. That's what I typically do.
Those so that they could grow, and then you obviously got to get a bigger tank. So that was like, because I asked him, I was like, hey, what happened? Like, this thing's still the same size when I left.
Oh my gosh.
They told me like, oh yeah, like you know how it had the baby chart. I was like,
yeah, that's a perfect example. Same clutch of eggs, different feeding habits. Different sizes. Yeah, and some. Yeah. Yeah, that's with a lot of snake keeping community, a lot of people they call it power feeding, where they're just like, probably just days between, just like eat, get to be an adult as soon as possible so I can breed you and then make money and sell the babies and keep your breeding thing kind of faster. So yeah, it depends. That really, affects their growth. Okay, poisonous versus venomous, yay. There's the different thing. People say poisonous snakes, venomous snakes. I mean, everyone knows if somebody's like, oh, that's a poisonous snake. We know what we're talking about. But it is 2 separate things. Poisonous is if you bite it and you get sick, that's poisonous. If it bites you and then you get sick, then it's venomous. So poison, that's in like frogs. A lot of amphibians have poison, and either from glands or from what they eat. So poison dart frogs, they are not poisonous in captivity because what they eat in the wild gets into their system, into their body, is in their skin excretions, everything. So they are very poisonous in the wild. But people that keep dart frogs in captivity and feed them like flightless fruit flies, really small crickets, they're not poisonous at all. So that was something that kind of blew my mind when I first heard it. Some things are poisonous no matter what they eat. Like we'll talk about some toads, they have a gland that contains a toxin. Versus venomous, that is, they have a specific gland just for delivering venom, either from a stinger like a scorpion, or in rattlesnake's case, they have fangs. So that's kind of the difference. They are 2 different things, even though it's kind of used interchangeably sometimes. So we're going to get into kind of what the different factions of reptiles. So this is kind of where it started. The vertebrates, some went to fish, then here amphibians, then some broke off from amphibians. If you went over here into reptiles, you got your lizards, snakes, tuataras, and then over here into crocodiles, and then birds and the dinosaurs. And then over here, you got the mammals. So that's kind of how everything branched out into separate things.
Fish are considered reptiles?
No, they're vertebrates. So yeah, it's a vertebrate, and then amphibians. Oh, okay, so I don't know a ton about that. That's kind of
Are those like extinct?
Yeah, they're extinct. Yeah. In fact, have you guys seen Dimetrodon? It's the dinosaur with the fin on his back, on his 4 legs. That is actually not a dinosaur. That is one of those mammal-like reptiles. I think they're called synapsids. I don't know a whole bunch about them, but they They were kind of what became mammals, I believe.
What's an armadillo?
They're a mammal.
Mammal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into it in the mammal class, what classifies a mammal, which a lot of times is hair, milk, yeah. Pardon me? Live birth, yes. Yeah, so those are,
Olivia,
yes.
I'm sorry. So the tiger, where is the tiger? I think so. It's the family with the dinosaur. Is that the dinosaur?
Yeah, they kind of broke off into these mammalish reptiles that aren't the same as the reptiles that we have now. They're all extinct. And then, yeah, the mammals kind of split from there. And they've obviously kept going. So, yeah, they're kind of confusing. Yes?
I was a little confused by that too. It says reptile family tree, but not all those branches are reptiles, obviously. So is there one, are you trying to follow one branch or two branches to get all the reptiles? Or
It's kind of confusing. Taxonomy is a whole study that, yeah, kind of shows where, yeah, the reptiles spread out over here and then over here. So crocodiles are actually closer related to dinosaurs than lizards are. And of course, birds are very closely related.
So it's like the connection to each.
Yeah, if they split off and some go this way, some evolve and go this way, it kind of just spreads out.
Evolution.
Yeah, taxonomy is quite the thing. In fact, here's a whole thing showing how crazy taxonomy can be, which you don't need to know all this. I'm just kind of, it's how they sort of categorize every organism. There's this for plants, there's this for insects. So this, our little fence lizard, this is the guy that's out all the time. We call it the western fence lizard. And its Latin name is Scoloporus occidentalis. And then it has subspecies too, but we're just going to focus on this. And that comes from this family, and then another subfamily. Oh no, genus, then subfamily, family, suborder, order, and then Reptilia is the class, and then there's vertebrates, that's their subphylum. And then yeah, animals, like as animal kingdom is as broad as you can possibly go. So it's a long thing. It's very useful for if you're doing research and you're a scientist, but with what we're doing and educating people with, you mostly just need to know common names. But some animals have multiple common names, so it can get kind of confusing. So we're going to talk about the different classes? Let's see, reptiles. The different orders. So crocodilians, we do not have them here. They've been around a really long time. They're also ectotherms, like most reptiles, very big though. And they don't have visible ears, which is something lizards have. But they have excellent hearing because it's all internal under their scales. And they're strict carnivores. So I'm just touching on them because they're part of the family, but we don't really need to know it. Another one's the Tuatara. It looks like a lizard, but it's its own separate group, and it's the only one in that group. Here's that crazy tree again. So they kind of went off and did their own thing, and then lizards and snakes formed their own. They both had a common ancestor. But the Tuatara is the only one that's really left from that genus. Yes?
Is there anything like unique about the Tuatara that sets it apart from a lizard?
Kind of. So they have some things they share with lizards. I mean, obviously they look like a lizard at first glance. They have a third parietal eye on top of their heads, which some lizards do too. They're only in New Zealand. They're nocturnal. But I think like the main thing that definitely they do not have with any other lizards or snakes is a second row of upper teeth. So I was reading about them. I still kind of am confused on why they're not a lizard, but
How large?
they're pretty big, like iguana size, yeah.
Whenever you make like your own like classification for one animal, it feels kind of like a waste.
Yeah,
It's like, why?
I don't know.
There used to be more, and now there's only
Yeah,
one.
yeah, there used to be more in their family, and now they're the only ones left from that family, so,
Is
yes.
that in a place in the hierarchy that you showed that there's one family, but a bunch of cousins in that family?
Wait, on the last one?
No, just the one you were showing. It says one. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Tara,
Yeah, so there's,
one type, and then there's a bunch of cousins under that type for different types of Tutara? Or is there just
nope.
one?
I think there's like maybe 1 or 2 species. Yeah, that's it. He doesn't have, all his cousins and relatives have gone extinct, unfortunately.
Okay.
So yeah, they're kind of just their lone survivor in their class. And then, yes, snakes and lizards, there's a lot of them. Yes?
Isolated on an island.
Yeah, they're on New Zealand. That's the only place they're at. So they've kind of been isolated and been able to keep their family together as like one group.
If you go to New Zealand, would you find that they're aggressive? Are they meat eaters?
I don't know. I think they are meat eaters. They eat a lot of like insects, maybe some small vertebrates.
Do they swim?
I think they can swim a little. Yeah.
There's got a lot of questions about this guy.
Yeah, I know. I don't. It's funny because I just touched on it. I don't know all the details.
I'm wondering about the nature of a nocturnal reptile. Because it's not as warm at night.
Yeah.
So what's up with that?
I think it's because, yeah, that's not quite as common. There are some nocturnal reptiles here. In fact, we'll talk about some of them, but yes.
There's a great horned lizard which is around. It looks more like this one than it does a western fence lizard.
Yeah.
I noticed you didn't have the great horned lizard, the one with the prehistoric.
Oh, well, yeah, I have them. We're going to talk about them too.
Is it related to this one? Or
Nope. It's actually very closely related to the western fence lizard. It's way off from this, even though they both have those crazy spikes and similar characteristics, which is two things like kind of in separate areas evolved to fill that niche. That's convergent evolution. So it's like they're, one example would be, this is mammal related, is we had wolves in North America and Asia, or Europe, and then on Australia, they had the thylacine, which was a marsupial predator, and their skulls compared to a wolf skull look really similar because they both filled that predator niche in their habitats, even though one's way over here as a marsupial versus a non-marsupial in the canid family. So it's a whole can of worms. But we're gonna move on we're gonna start with amphibians though. Obviously, yeah, they're vertebrates. They have smooth and slimy skin. A lot of people will see reptiles and be like, oh, their skin's slimy. Nope. But these guys definitely are. They have that cold-blooded. They're kind of really unique in that they have a complex life cycle. So kind of like we were talking about the beetles and like butterflies, they have a complete metamorphosis they start with egg, then a larva that's kind of maybe more grub-like, and then they go into a cocoon or chrysalis and then become their adult form, which is completely different looking. These are a vertebrate that has a similar kind of situation, which is so weird to me. And a lot of them actually do not have lungs. Some will breathe through their skin. Some have lungs and they breathe through their skin. They've got a whole separate way of respiration. And a lot of them vocalize. So a lot of other reptiles do not, but we'll get into that. So amphibians. Here's some of that life cycle. They always start as an egg, and then they grow and they come out, and there's something called like tadpole, pollywog are common terms, that slowly grows legs. With frogs and toads, they actually get the back legs first, and then they get their front legs. It's the opposite with the salamanders and newts. They get their front legs first, then their back legs. And a lot of salamanders, which we'll talk about, don't even, just kind of skip this whole thing, and they just go from egg, forming completely in that egg, and then popping out and being like ready to go. So newts and salamanders, they at first glance look like a lizard. They've got four legs. They have tails, which is something that toads and frogs only have in their larval stage. They don't have claws, so that's one thing. Lizards always have claws. These guys don't. Newts are a type of salamander, and they tend to have bumpier skin and kind of spend more time on land. So it's not all salamanders are newts, but all newts are salamanders. And a lot of them, like some will keep gills their whole life. They're like all over the place with the lung situation. And let's see. Yeah, some will stay in that larval stage. They just skip the part where they're in the water as a like polywog, and they're mostly all carnivorous.
Don't frogs have like a nubby tail?
Yes, yeah, when they're larval.
It goes away once they're
Yeah, they're not in their adult form, yeah, but they do have a tail, it just goes away. These guys keep their tail. Yes?
So if anybody wants to get in the Guinness Book of Records or notoriety or something, there used to be a Newhall newt,
Oh.
and it was a fairly small newt, and it's almost translucent. And it
Oh.
lives in little crevices and cracks,
Mhm.
and it was seen up in what is now the Newhall Open Space area.
Mhm.
And the last time it was seen by somebody who then described it to Ian was, gosh, probably about 12 years ago when Ian was still here, 15 years ago, whatever it was. And they went looking for it, but they went looking for it when it was a drought after all the rain.
Oh.
It was 2005, I think they had all the rain, and somebody was describing it. He says, my goodness, that's the Newhall newt. And then we've had nothing but drought. So if it's survived, it's been in very deep crevices where there's some sort of water. But if we get water again, we might find that newt again.
I will go look for it. We'll go on a newt quest because I want to find that.
In the Santa Susanas or the eastern edge of the San Gabriels, look for a clear salamander or clear newt.
Okay.
And it would be found in a crevice that has water.
That would be really cool to find. Yeah, amphibians, they can really, like that frog that lets itself just freeze, they can just basically pause existing until there's rain, some species. So that's probably what that guy's doing. Yes?
You said that they breathe through their skin. Do they also absorb water through their skin?
Yes. Yeah, it's very porous, which is why they're kind of delicate and very susceptible to problems in their environment, which is why typically if you're going to handle frogs or toads, like it's good to wear gloves in case, like, say you put on like hand lotion or who knows what's on your hand, they can absorb that and could make them sick. So gloves kind of prevent anybody from spreading anything because they also carry certain stuff that could make us sick. Yes?
Yeah, I had heard that handling a salamander, even the oils of your skin can be problematic.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, should you never handle one with bare hands?
I guess if you had to, like, say you're digging, oh no, let me scoop that out, he's in my garden, you can do that really quick. Or if you get a chance, it's probably better to, yeah, if you have like gloves to just kind of move it. Yeah. Also, yeah, a lot of them carry, sometimes they have salmonella, and if you don't wash your hands afterwards, which is recommended with any reptile and amphibian, and you put your hands in your mouth, maybe you can get sick. Yes?
Many years, not many years ago, but 40 years ago, when I was in the canyon, in those multi-trunk trees, that had, an area in the middle that would catch water. Sometimes we would see salamanders, I think they were salamanders, in the oaks, and we haven't seen them in ages.
Yeah. I wonder, I'm going to show pictures of some of the local ones, and maybe you could be like, oh, it looked like that. I've never seen a wild salamander, but I mostly spend time in dry places, so that might be part of it. California newts. So we don't have these guys here in Plaza Rita, but we do have them kind of near San Dimas, is what I've heard, up in the San Gabriel Mountains. And believe it or not, this is one of the most poisonous animals in our area. So not venomous, but poisonous. There's an old story, I don't know if it's true, about like cowboys, they were out camping and they had their coffee or their water for their coffee just out by the fire. They went to bed. Some newts crawled in, hung out in their water for their coffee. Next morning they made their coffee that had newt juice in it, and they died. So I don't know if that's a true story. It's kind of a thing, but that's these guys. Which it probably is. It is totally plausible, though. Yeah, so they're super, super toxic. Yes, definitely 100% wear gloves with this guy if you do touch them. Garter snakes, though, which they are very kind of aquatic adjacent snakes. They eat a lot of fish, amphibians. they'll eat these guys. And so back and forth, these guys are like, oh, we got to get more toxic for the garter snake to not eat us. And the garter snake over time is like, oh, I got to build up a tolerance to this toxicness for this thing I like to eat. So back and forth, it's genetic, evolutionary arms race, yeah. And then, so these guys just got so toxic, it's like enough to kill like a lot of mammals, but it's like, just because this is a snake and this are just kind of back and forth trying to out-evolve each other and avoid eating or not getting eaten. They do have a larval stage though. They're one of the few salamander types that we're going to talk about that have a larval stage. So kind of, actually I'm sure you've seen axolotls. They look like this. They stay that way forever. They're kind of their own weird thing because they just keep that larval stage, keep that tail, keep the gills, just stay underwater, but they're also pretty threatened. Another thing that the newts will do is they'll like stick out their legs, show that bright, scary orange throat, stick their tail in the air, especially when they're babies because everything wants to eat you when you're little. But yeah, they just kind of do this like, I just thought it was like so weird looking. Okay, it is. So this is another one of our, could possibly be here. There's, I think, historically a few observations. We have a replica of one in the museum. And this might be that one that you were talking about with the oak.
45 years ago, 42, 45 years ago, but it looks like that.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Yeah, our local ones in this area have these spots. And they're known to kind of climb, which is unusual. A lot of these salamanders and frogs and stuff, many of them just like to stay on the ground. Yeah, they don't have lungs. They're one of those ones that just kind of breathes through their skin. And they don't have a larval stage that the larva or the baby will stay inside the egg until it emerges as a juvenile. So kind of.
Did you say that they all the salamanders have some kind of toxin on them?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have to double check. I don't think they all have a toxin because not all frogs, like they all have something that, like don't lick a frog, but but like toads I know have a specific toxic gland, same with those newts. So yeah.
If we only see them after rain, where do they go when it's dry?
I really have no idea. I don't know if they're underground and just like hanging out in the roots of the tree, just.
I think I read that they hang out in leaf litter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I said. In fact, one of our other talks when we were, I think it was the botany walk, I was like, we had all those mushrooms. I was like digging the leaf litter, like, oh, maybe I'll find a salamander, which nope. They actually, from what I've heard, have a really powerful bite, even though they're like that big. So.
What's semi-prehensile? I mean,
oh, yeah, prehensile.
Or you not? Like, what is it, the semi?
It's so weird. It's like, so a prehensile tail, which we'll talk about when we get to mammals with the opossum, and it's like what monkeys have. They'll wrap their tail around something, kind of use it to support themselves. It's like they're an extra arm. But some animals, it's semi-prehensile, so they'll kind of sort of wrap their tail around, but they can't, it's not as, they can't, yeah, it's not as flexible and to grab onto stuff like some things. In fact, I think opossums are they prehensile or semi-prehensile? I'm not sure, but monkeys definitely, they've got that prehensile tail down.
What do they eat?
Lots of small insects, little slugs, worms, invertebrates, very small things in the leaf litter. I don't know how they find enough to eat, but yeah, they're mostly just little invertebrates.
Do they have teeth?
I don't think they have teeth. Yeah, they just, good pinchy power. And that's kind of how they lay their eggs. They'll sort of hang out and put them hanging, which I think is in our display over there. And between, I think it's just part of their reproductive thing. They'll hang it with the, I know, like, oh, let me go upside down. Yeah, so actually I should note, with amphibians, it's all external fertilization. There's, the female will either lay her eggs, the male will deposit sperm on it, and then, okay, they're fertilized. Or sometimes the males will deposit sperm, it'll just be hanging out there, and the female will be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna take this, thanks. I could use this to have my babies.
So Olivia,
Yes.
the eggs doesn't come with the stream?
Yeah,
It comes with everything?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because when we get to toads, they lay their eggs on like a strand. It's weird.
Olivia?
Yes.
Who eats whom, the dragonfly larvae or the salamander?
Whoever's biggest, probably. In fact, so see these little bitty guys? Oh yeah, dragonfly larva would eat that in an instant. But if this was a bigger one and the dragonfly larva was small, it would eat it. So yeah, pretty ferocious. So this is another salamander. It could possibly be here. I couldn't find any accounts of it. They're super crazy tiny. Like that looks like a stick. Same thing. Their larvae emerge as mini adults. They don't have an aquatic tadpole-like stage. Has anyone ever seen one of these right here?
I found one in a planter
Okay.
a long time ago, far away from water source.
That's so I didn't include it because it's more associated with like gardens and urban stuff. But yeah, there's a garden slender salamander. It looks practically the same.
Or maybe not.
Yeah, it's probably what you had. Because yeah, they're mostly in the ground in like dirt and leaf litter.
I have a
But
question.
yes,
All of these salamanders who require high humidity for respiration, why are they here?
I know, good question. They probably aren't here because it's not very moist anymore.
Yeah.
Amphibians kind of fluctuate with the moisture. I know, like there'll be just, we're not in a drought, it's wet. There's lots of amphibians. Then when there is a drought, it's like, oh, there's a handful. Yes. Yeah, they're tiny.
Really tiny.
Actually, this one was found at Stoneview Nature Center, which is one of our other natural area parks in the middle of Culver City. So, yeah, I wanted to include. Somebody found it in our department.
That's a very moist area.
Yeah, it's by the coast. So, yeah, if anybody finds a salamander here, like, call me. This is another one which, when I watched the herpetology video from a couple years ago, Chuck mentioned you had seen one, Ron. Yeah, so I want to hear about this.
The Los Pinetos Trail, after a big rain, I tipped over a rock and I saw one and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a space alien. So I took a picture.
It's got big googly eyes.
Big eyes. So I took a picture and I showed it to, again, Ian Swift, and he identified it as the Monterey salamander. But to answer somebody's question, why are there salamanders here? Placerita Canyon is surprisingly moist in some spots.
Mm-hmm.
Like the waterfall trail, we'll go up there during our walk around history hike.
Mm-hmm.
It's even in really dry years and in the middle of summer, August, September, there'll still be water under rocks and a little bit of stream. So there are surprisingly some moist areas in Placerita Canyon, these deep, dark canyons. I mean, the stream out here dries up and it's dry as dust,
Yeah, Walker Ranch.
Walker Ranch.
Stays moist.
Surprisingly moist areas that stay moist all year.
We have several ephemeral springs here.
Yeah,
That's true as well.
maybe I'll go on that Walker Ranch hike and just run around, dig through the leaf litter until I find one. That'll be my goal. Actually, what's really crazy, up the 395, if you're going towards Mammoth, there's I think it's the Inyo Mountain salamander. That area is super dry because that's part of the rain shadow area of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And there's observations of it in the spring on iNaturalist. I'm like, how does something like that live there? So this spring I'm going to be looking for that one over there because I need to see this weird thing. This one's really cool though so this is the genus and then species and then subspecies. And they come in multiple flavors. Well, not flavors, colors, but like do not lick amphibians. But yeah, you can see certain ones will have different areas to blend in with their environment. And they're still the same species. And ones, I guess, that are down here are close together. They can interbreed, but the farther they get, like I guess this guy's getting different enough that he can't breed with the guy down here if they ever cross paths. So they've kind of evolved to fit their area. So this is our guy. He's kind of the most like huh? Yeah.
What earned the leopard spotted one the nickname Croc Eater?
I have no idea. That's weird. Yeah, sometimes like you'll see a weird Latin name and you're like, okay, where did this come from? I don't know. That's a good question. But yeah, so I think we're going into frogs and toads. Okay, these are things you actually probably see here. They're more likely to live near water versus the salamanders that they do hang out in the leaf litter. They have these very long hind legs for swimming and leaping because they're definitely more aquatic. They don't have a tail unless they're a tadpole. Their larval stage, they lose that as they grow. Yeah, the larvae are called tadpoles or polywogs. They have webbed toes and that external egg fertilization, again, that amphibians have. So here is probably the most common frog that you'll see here in the spring. It's Baja California tree frog. They also call it the Pacific coarse frog, which I personally like calling it that because it has a lovely call. In fact, that I'm going to play their call in a little bit. If you're ever seen any movie and there's frog sounds, it's always this guy. Even if it's like, oh, we're in the African savannah, it's like, oh yeah, that's a California tree frog. So it's like the stereotypical ribbit. And they could be a lot of different colors. This is the same species, even though this guy's green, this guy's brown. But the main thing that kind of sets them apart from some of the other frogs in the area is they got this banded stripe that goes through their eye. And they also, because they're a tree frog, a thing tree frogs have is little round, sticky little fingers. So you could tell a tree frog based on rounded finger ends.
You know, Olivia, and also keep your ears open because they're starting to croak now. I was up at Walker Ranch yesterday afternoon, and you could hear them. They're out there making their distinctive sounds. So I think they're starting to breed.
Oh, good. Yeah. And so, so they make, or it's mostly, for breeding purposes, the males are advertising. And so this is how they lay their eggs. They're in a little cluster surrounded by jelly. So like that salamander had the weird little things to hang them up. Theirs is just a jelly ball that keeps them kind of protected in the water. I'm sure something eats them still.
We see that in our museum display, right? In the repair
Yes,
area.
yes, we do have a display of this in the repair, yeah. Here's the tadpole. They got their tail. And then they slowly get their legs. So this is one, he's just got a little bit of tail left. He's almost done. So that's kind of almost a frog. So here's one calling. They have this big throat sac. So yeah, that's the thing that a lot of frogs have is vocalization. Snakes and most lizards do not have that, but we'll talk about that. Sound. So, yep, that's what they sound like. Okay. The other common amphibian here would be the western toad. It's kind of hard to see, but he does not have those little rounded feet. They spend most of their time on the ground in holes, very rough skin. It's still kind of moist and slimy. The thing with them versus all other toads in our area is they have this yellow stripe down their back. So like I'll talk about the arroyo toad that I've had a lot of I remember the first time my parents saw one of these, like, oh, that's that rare arroyo toad. And then nope, it's just these guys and they're everywhere. They have a toxin, parotid glands behind their eyes. So right back in here, and I think they also have one on their leg if I'm not mistaken, that they can secrete a nasty toxic taste. So for example, an animal like tries to eat one, they'll put it in their mouth, they'll get that and they'll spit it out. They'll foam at the mouth, they'll be just awful tasting. Foul taste in their mouth. They tend to not really hop. They'll hop a little, but they do this like crawl thing. In fact, grab it. It's kind of hard to see, but this is a replica of a western toad, and it's kind of, this is one I actually made. That's another thing I do. I'm to have it doing that kind of crawling motion. I don't know if we have any live ones here, but when we did, I throw the crickets in and they kind of come out. They do this weird little kind of crawl to it and then get it. Another funny thing with these toads, if you ever see them eat, they close their eyes when they swallow because they use those muscles to force their food into their mouth. Toads are basically a stomach with a mouth and little legs to move the stomach around. They will pee if you pick them up. That's kind of one of their defense mechanisms. They will not give you warts. They just have them because part of their some of their poison glands and stuff.
Do they hibernate at all?
Yeah, they'll go down underground, just kind of wait it out.
The spadefoot?
I don't know. I'm actually looking up spadefoots and trying to find them in the area.
I would also, when I lived there, after a big rain, all of a sudden there were spadefoot toads everywhere.
That is cool.
I know, and I lived there for 13 years, and that was the only time I saw them.
That's kind of how this.
Cyclical or something.
Yeah, that's how the spadefoots are. They're just kind of waiting, and when it gets really rainy, just boom, spadefoot toads.
Amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Spadefoots used to be in the south fork of the San River.
Yes.
So I happen to notice that the Latin name suggests it's northern instead of western. What's up with this? Is this like an old name that didn't really match eventually, or like?
I don't know. So I kept this one just as because this is the one we have is the California toad. That's technically it, but the western toad is the main species. The California toad's a subspecies. So I think just that whole our subspecies is here, but it's the whole species itself goes all the way up north. So I think that might be it. Yeah, I've never taken that Latin name apart. That's good. So here's how their eggs are. You'll see this hopefully this spring in that pond. They do this basically like little strands with the little eggs and like long.
Black pearls.
Yeah. So yes, they'll have tons. So kind of the reproductive method that the amphibians do is tons of babies, all the babies. A lot of them aren't going to survive, maybe a handful, but throw it to the wind and hopefully one or two sticks. So it's lots of babies and hope some of them make it. So their tadpoles tend to be this really dark black with the little tail. Here's one that's almost a toad. But and then this one, I don't know if you guys have these here. Up where I am in the Antelope Valley in the foothills there, we have this guy, the California tree frog, which they don't have that mask. Unless they're super young, they kind of have it like the Baja California tree frog, but these guys, he's just becoming granite. And they actually, I think they kind of shift their color. It takes a couple days. It's not like a chameleon where it's like really fast to kind of match where they're at. So yeah, they're just becoming granite.
The frogs, like that one, they blend like the lizards, depends on the area they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll be like, okay, a couple days, let me take on this color slowly. Kind of like that crab spider that I mentioned last week that it'll be a couple days, but it'll be yellow. Then if it goes on buckwheat, it's gonna kind of fade to white. And I have no idea how things can change color like that. And this is their tadpole, so they're a lot lighter than the toads. The toads are always just super black little tadpoles. These guys get kind of browns and spots. You can see them starting to become a frog. So here,
I have a quick question.
yes.
With the tadpoles, their long tail, what happens to the tail? Does it shrink back in?
Yes.
Or
Yeah, actually,
because the legs come out, like closer to the round body part, and there's this long tail after it. So where does the tail go?
They absorb it back in and turn that tail and what it's into legs. Oh. So it's just slowly absorbed back in, and it's weird because I've had it where it's I've raised a couple tadpoles a few times. They'll be really big, and then they'll start get their legs, and then it feels like they get smaller, and then you have a toad that's way smaller than when it was a tadpole because it's just redistributing that tail into other things and getting more toad-shaped. So this is that arroyo toad. Here it is compared to the California, our local toad. Let me know if you ever see one of these. They're endangered. This is the spadefoot, and they call it that because, they don't have, amphibians don't have nails, but they have this little hard thing on their foot that they use as a spade to kind of dig. And they'll just dig and hunker down until that rainstorm. And yeah, I read this thing where the fertilized eggs can be tadpoles in 15 hours and then 2 weeks to go from tadpole to I am now a toad. So kind of one mystery that we're kind of trying to figure out at Vasquez Rocks is we had a puddle of water. It was starting to dry up. There were some tadpoles in it. So we took it, we raised them. Okay, now they're or some of them turned into toads. We put them back. But one has stayed a tadpole for like 6 months. We do not know what this thing is. He has his little back legs. We were looking at pictures. It looks kind of like a spadefoot toad, but it was the only one out of this thing of just western toads that we raised. So we have this mystery tadpole.
So Olivia, just
Yes.
Ian Swift, again, I mentioned Ian.
Oh, yes.
You mentioned that, some tadpoles, their transformation into a toad or whatever, it's dependent on the level of oxygen in the water. And he said when the stream starts to dry up,
It's like,
it speeds up.
yeah, yes. Yeah, they're okay. We got to get back.
On the other hand, I think I remember him talking about if you just keep it in a well oxygenated tank, and they'll stay as a tadpole for.
I think that's that was my hypothesis with this one. I'm like, I said, like, stop giving it new water and stuff. Let the water get crappy. So he's like, oh no, I got to turn it into a toad now. Get out of here. But yeah, we have this weird toad. So that's kind of a little science experiment we got going on over there.
Olivia,
Yes.
for everybody's information, Ian used to be a supervisor here at Park. Before him, we had Frank aboard, and they were both world-renowned entomologists. But one of the neat things about Ian was he was a county certified biologist, which is why we always wanted him to help us find things, because then he could validate them.
And he grew up here. There's pictures of him like as a little kid with one of our tortoises.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was a junior ranger here with my son.
Oh, that's cool. So you've known him since he was really little. Yeah, he knows a lot, especially about beetles and invertebrates. So here is the frog that we don't want here. This is the American bullfrog. They're invasive in California, and they're kind of a problem. Like sometimes we have non-native species, and it doesn't really affect the native species too much. Like house sparrows aren't too threatening to other sparrows because they stay near urban areas. But these guys, people will throw into rivers, and they will eat anything and everything that fits in their mouth. They are just, and this is their tadpole. It's freaking huge. And they'll stay that way for 2 years. And they're really hefty, big old frogs. The main thing is they have this kind of tympanic membrane that's their ear sort of underneath all their skin that's really distinct compared to our other local frogs.
Where's it from?
They're from the East Coast, but they've been introduced into our area and causing havoc. And so, yeah, hopefully not in Placer Canyon.
Olivia, one of the problems is people get amphibians and reptiles.
Oh, I have I will talk about that with the turtles.
All sorts of, and turtles, and they no longer want them, so they say, okay, where's a pond around here? I'll just let it go.
Yep.
And that causes a big problem.
Yeah, one of my wildlife sanctuaries that I manage is Tahunga Ponds. It's right off the 210 freeway. It's water spaces, and we have problems with these. There's a biology group that comes there, and they pull so many invasive things out of the ponds, like fish that people put in there to fish, and yeah, these frogs. There's red-eared sliders, which we'll get to those. Yes?
So the tympanic membrane, what is that for?
It's basically their ear. It's this thingy right here.
So they hear very well. So it's like a eardrum.
Yeah, it's
Equivalent.
yeah, essentially, I think that would be, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the frogs, hearing is important because they vocalize to attract mates with the croaking. These guys have a really loud, deep croak. But, yeah. Yes?
So for these invasive species that are large enough to sort of grab by the hand, are there like extermination efforts or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, there are extermination things. They will, if these are caught, they dispatch them and try to just keep them from spreading.
Do they belong to the Americas, just not on the West Coast?
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure they're native. Yeah, American. Yeah, I think they're more of a Eastern thing.
Yeah, they're in the Northeast.
Oh, okay.
I grew up with them.
Oh.
But so if you find an American bullfrog or like any invasive species, what do you do?
Don't let it back where you got it.
Yeah, like should you try to catch it and bring it to a wildlife center or something?
Yeah, that's kind of a debate. Like, yeah, it's good to remove it.
Like,
Huh?
do you kill it with a rock?
It depends on how you want to deal with it. Yeah, because it's like, I'm always like, if I have to dispatch something, it's like, I want to do it as humane as possible. I don't know how you do it with a frog, but yeah,
If they're edible, just
actually, yeah, so amphibians, that's one of the things that I'll talk about later, is they are a food source across the world, reptiles and amphibians. Like frogs' legs are all typically from the bullfrog. I had them once. They were like chicken, but not. Like, that's the only way I can describe it. But yeah. So I guess if there's a whole bunch of them and you catch them, you can just have some kind of frog cookout at the end of the day. I don't know.
Bring some butter and garlic and
Yeah.
saute pan.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to take a break. I'm going to get into reptiles or.
You want to take a break now, then we'll come back in here and then.
Actually, let me just talk about tortoises first, and then we'll go into the snakes and lizards, and then we'll go for a walk. Or do we want to just power through everything and then go for a walk? Break? Yeah, I feel like a break is good. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just talk about the turtles really quick, and then we'll take a break. So yeah, reptiles, same thing. They're vertebrates. They have scales versus like the amphibians and salamanders and all them that have that kind of gooey skin. Cold-blooded ectotherms, shelled eggs, or bear live young, which is kind of, yes, some species will retain the eggs in their body and then the babies come out and it looks like live birth, yeah. They fertilize their eggs internally versus the amphibians who just kind of both squirt out the necessary thing and mix it together to get fertilized eggs. They have, similar to most mammals, with internal fertilization. And they have lungs, at least one. Lungs, not like the salamanders who don't have lungs. That's a reptile requirement. We're going to talk about turtles and tortoises. They're really cool because they have this shell. Their backbone developed into this protective thing for them. They have lungs that are protected in there. None of them have teeth. They have this kind of beak for grabbing their prey or eating veggies. They can be omnivores, but tortoises in particular are vegetarians completely, and they live a really long time. So that's kind of some characteristics of tortoises.
Does this apply to terrapins too? This kind of
Yes. So I just kind of talk about the turtles and tortoises because I think that's mostly what we have here. Turtles are more aquatic. Tortoises only on land. They are not going to go in the water. They might go in a puddle and just kind of soak, but they cannot swim. Turtles have, that's mixed up. They have a larger domed shell. These guys have a flatter streamlined shell because they live in the water most of the time. They have these flat kind of webbed limbs. In fact, look closely. We have some western pond turtles here that you can look at up close and see those webbed feet. And they're omnivores. Some will eat, usually when they're young girls, they'll eat a lot more like vertebrates, bugs, and all kinds of things. But they'll also eat like kind of vegetation in the water. Whereas these guys, only veggies. So our western pond turtle is, I think, probably our only native turtle in this area. They actually, they can spend a long time outside of water and kind of wait for the rain. But I know that up near Lake Hughes, Lake Elizabeth, there was a lot of them. But when those ponds were drying up, I think people were taking them in and kind of just keeping them until they came back, and then they could put them back in the lake when there was a lake. But I feel like I remember hearing about something like that. But they're vulnerable because they're losing a lot of habitat. And they're losing a lot of habitat to another turtle that we will talk about. Yes?
On the corner of McBean and Newhall Ranch Road where the CPK is, and they got those ponds out there that always have geese and turtles. Is that the type of turtle that's that? There's about 1 million of them.
No, that's like near like Bridgeport area.
Yeah.
Okay, no, it's not this.
Okay.
It's their They're invasive, yes, the pond slider. They're also called red-eared sliders. They got this little red thing. They are an invasive species, mostly from pet owners, because like, I forgot who was saying, yes?
That last slide, back it up one. I've noticed something on turtles. The large panels, the major part of the turtle, there's 13 of them almost.
Oh, the scoots on the back of the...
And not the lower one, but the upper one.
Oh, this?
Go that last slide you got.
Oh.
There's 13 of them. On anytime you look at one, I've counted them, you'll find 13.
Wait, this?
One of the mysteries of life.
Wow.
Always?
Huh?
Always?
Ooh.
Yeah, every time I've ever looked at them.
Okay, I got to count my tortoise over here now.
We're here. Bring it in.
I'll bring it. So the problem with these guys is people get them and they're this little thing. They're like cute. Oh my God, a little pet turtle. It's just like the Ninja Turtles. Oh my God, I'm gonna have a pet turtle. It's gonna be great. Oh wait, it gets big and smelly and not very nice. Oh, I don't want this anymore. Okay, let's find a water source and just ditch it. And that's why you'll see these guys just chilling on the edges of banks. They're all over the place. That's what's at Bridgeport. I knew someone that dumped their turtle there before I knew better. And yeah, they're eating native turtles, native tadpoles, bugs. They're just a menace on society.
Native from?
I think Asia.
Asia?
In fact, they're an important food source in a lot of Asian countries. And that's part of what I think, not just pet owners bringing them here, was they were brought over as a food source. But yeah, so red-eared sliders are a problem. And so we do have one tortoise, the Mojave Desert tortoise. They are critically endangered because of habitat loss. We have 2 animal ambassadors here, but they are asleep because they go through a brumation. We do have them in Los Angeles County. In fact, this is a picture of a baby one at one of the wildlife sanctuaries that I have not seen one in the wild yet, but this spring I'm going to be camping out and hopefully I'll see one because they're so great. Usually they can't go back into the wild once they're in captivity because they'll get this upper respiratory sickness that they could spread to other tortoises. So they'll sometimes they'll wheeze, sometimes they'll get like itchy eyes, and it's kind of hard to describe. They're okay in captivity, but we just don't want to release them back where they can cause a problem. They live forever, or as close to forever as we can get, 50 to 80 years. They're actually really great. Hopefully when our 2 boys, Turbo and Speedy, wake up, you can get to see them. They're super cool. But in the meantime, I have a replica tortoise. Whoops, let me just grab this guy. Where's my baby? Oh, there it is. So this is another replica I made. In fact, this belongs to another museum that I made it for, and I haven't delivered it to him yet, so I'm just using it until then. But this is, you can see those kind of elephanty like back feet. They have front legs that are made mostly for digging versus a turtle that's kind of got webbed and for swimming, that big domed shell. Here is, oh gosh, it's in my pocket. This is what they look like when they hatch. This is as big as they are. This is another replica that came from a place that unfortunately this one did not failure to thrive, so I got it and was able to make a mold of it. So these are whole separate thing. I do reptile replicas for museums as well, and I make molds of animals that are not alive and then recast them in plastic and paint them. So these are fake.
That's taxidermy.
Yeah, a little bit of taxidermy. I'm mostly doing model making now, but replica work, restoration, all kinds of exhibit stuff. So that's what this one is.
And it's made of what?
This is resin. It's plastic, which is nice because it's good so I can show tortoises when they're asleep.
Was that 3D printed?
No, this was molded off a dead tortoise I got from that museum. So they gave me one, said, here, make this fake. Yes?
Is the habitat loss due to building and growth?
A little bit of that. A really big one, though, is solar. Solar fields they kind of like, oh, we'll just do it out in the desert, sunny, out of sight, out of mind. But they've destroyed a lot of habitat for these solar farms, which it's great, but just we need to put them like on our roofs and more in like along roads and stuff instead of just, it's the desert, no one cares. So it's kind of a problem with it.
What's their, who's their predators?
So when they're about this big, people mostly, I know back in like the 70s, people at camp, they'd see one and be like, oh, I'm going to take a turtle home. In fact, most of our tortoises that we have in captivity, I'm sure that happened to them back all those years ago, and they've just been in captivity, passed around owner to owner ever since. So there are probably not a lot that would get them once they're this size. However, when they're this size, they don't have that hard shell. That's actually kind of soft and squishy. So when they're babies, it's like a lovely little sandwich for a lot of things. Ravens are one of their biggest predators because ravens are another thing that will eat anything. They are native, but yeah, ravens will just peck into that shell when it's weak and just eat them. And raven populations have increased with human encroachment. So as we get more into the desert tortoise's habitat, us and the ravens kind of are getting them. So they're actually really cool thing. They were they 3D printed a tortoise shell, and I think it made a horrible noise or sprayed something. So when the ravens got close to it, they would have an unpleasant experience. So they'd be like, okay, do not go near those things. So I don't know. They've just started doing that, and it's super cool. So I hope that works out well for them to protect them. Yes. Oh, you first.
If you have a tortoise, figure it like the 50 to 80 years
Mm-hmm.
on the long haul, if you keep it as a pet.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and I bought a red-footed tortoise.
Oh,
from
yeah.
a pet store,
Mm-hmm.
and when we were single digits.
Yeah.
55 years later,
Uh-huh.
my brother still has it.
Yep.
And so when you have these, when you're talking about 50 to 80 years captivity or plus,
Put it your will.
they're in the same category as parrots. You have to make
Yeah.
arrangements when
It's
you die.
it's a lifestyle, yeah, for sure. You have to take that into account. Like, oh man, I hope my kids like this or want to keep it, or hopefully, yeah. I'm sure some of the stories some of our captive tortoises could tell, like, oh, I've been through 3 families, they all died, or whatever. But yeah, they're very long-lived. Yes.
So, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but what I've learned as a kid is that reptiles don't bond with anything or anyone, but amphibians can. Is that true?
It really depends on the individual. I think they totally can. I feel like out of all the reptiles that I've worked with, tortoises are the most kind of personable. They've got a personality. They know their schedule. They know when you're coming to bring them their salad. They have personality.
That Otis, that box turtle in New Jersey State Park. He's he comes up to people
Oh my gosh.
TikTok.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna have to look him up. Yeah, I feel like they've got a cool little personality. I've some snakes and stuff, they get used to you. They're not like a dog or a cat, but they'll kind of be like, it's that, you're picking me up. Oh yeah, it's that warm thing. Okay, I'm cool. I'll sit and watch TV with this person or just warm up. Yes?
I read somewhere that if you move the tortoise away from its usual everyday place that it stays, that they're very, they get very confused.
Yeah.
And it could shorten their life.
Yeah, if it's like, oh, this has changed, or where's my burrow, where's my normal water source? They kind of have their things set in stone. Yes?
What's the proper term for the handles or on the carapace?
Oh.
What are they called? People ask me, and I never knew what they're called.
Which these?
No, the top, the panels.
Oh, scoots.
What are they called?
Scoots. SCUTES. Scoots. Wait, let me count this. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13. It's 13. I was like, I gotta look this up. I'm curious. So, yes.
Now, I'd like to give a commercial for the environment, that we actually have a desert tortoise preserve in the desert. But people feel if they're 1 foot off that preservation land and they see a tortoise, but they can take it home with them.
Nope, no.
And the problem is that we need to talk about habitat and maintaining it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big thing. Even with like tortoises that are captive bred, I just went to a reptile show and there was little sulcata tortoises. Oh my God, they're cute. Those things grow into, they're the third largest tortoise. They grow into a dinosaur. If you want a pet brontosaurus, there you go, get one of those. But they eat you out of house and home. They're huge. They'll dig under your house. And like, I know my boss has one and she's like, oh yeah, it dug under her shed and like messed something up. And so it's like, you got to think about these things.
They dig under fences and go down the street.
Yep. Yeah, desert tortoises too. So yeah, that's kind of the problem. Don't just be like, oh, I'm going to get this animal on a whim. You know, look up how long is it going to live? What does it need? Like, I would love to rescue a sulcata tortoise, but I live way out in, it gets cold where I live, and they don't hibernate. So I'd have to build a heated, like, corral for this thing. And I'm like, oh, I can't do that right now. So I could only have desert tortoises, because when it's cold, they just go into brumation, you put them in a box, and 6 months later, pull them out again. So kind of works out. So yeah, it's things you got to think about like that before you get one of these really long-lived animals. So I think, anything else about tortoises? I think we're going to take a break.
Motorbikers in the Mojave, do they damage the habitat?
Yeah, that's one too, especially if it's making new trails off into places. Getting hit by cars is a big one. I know like out in Mojave Preserve, it's like drive slow, because if there's one in the road, you don't want to hit it. And if you do see one in the road and it is like actually going to be hurt, like say this is one, you're not supposed to ever touch them, because they could also pee and release a lot of their valuable water they've spent forever getting from their food. So like if this is one in the road, if you do absolutely have to move it, which I'd recommend just try not to, keep it as low as you can. So it's not like this. Like our tortoises here, like when I've picked them up, you hold them, you always keep them like this. Don't be like that. But yeah, you want to hold them flat. But yeah, with a wild one, because they don't know what the heck's going on, suddenly they're flying, they're going to be like, oh my God. So, but yeah, desert tortoises are super cool. There are state reptile too, which is kind of fun fact. Yeah, okay.
I think she waited a while with the beanie, with the white beanie.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Did you have a question? Yes.
Okay, yeah, I have a question about the, you say once you have one in home, you cannot return it to the wild because of a respiratory disease. Is that they get it to humans, to us? Or
I think they mostly get it from their environment and it just stays with them. I think it's like with humidity could sometimes cause it. If they're being fed a lot leafier, greener stuff than whatever dry grass. Actually, in fact, my desert tortoise that I do for programming, it's funny, she gets this lovely little salad, you know what her favorite food is? Grass. When I take her for a walk and there's this dry grass, oh my God, she just loves it. She loves it way better than her very nice salad, so.
Take her for a walk?
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh yeah, get her some sun. So I just sit there, I'm just watching, and people will come by and be like, oh yeah, this is a desert tortoise talk, while she's just munching away. So yeah, usually just outside the park where I let her just munch on the grass, get some sun, see some people. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's mostly environment that causes that. Not 100% though. Okay, I guess, do we want to take a break now?
Yeah,
okay.
We're going to come back in here to finish up.
Yeah, we'll talk about snakes and lizards, and we'll go outside with whatever time we have and maybe see something. I'm gonna kick the tortoise. No, just kidding. I've done this where I'm like joking. I'm gonna throw it. So you guys can come take a look at this probably later to see how the turtles and tortoises have their spine literally built into their shell. We have a turtle shell probably from a red-eared slider, and then we have this giant thing, which I don't even know if this is from a desert tortoise because it's so huge. It looks like it, but it like flares out. It's monstrous. But I wanted to show with this one, this is from a boy tortoise. And you could tell because this gular horn is what they call it here, right by their head. This is what the males use to kind of fight and flip each other over. It's way more pronounced on the males versus this one was a female. See, hers is tiny. And another thing is with the male tortoises, it always kind of scoops under right here, versus the females, it's just flat, and that's mostly just so they can fit when they're doing certain things. But yeah, you can look at these closer because they're really amazing. Yeah. So now we're going to get into lizards and snakes. Okay, so lizards, it's the largest group of reptiles, over 6,000 species. They have scales, 4 legs with claws, except for a few that don't have claws, movable eyelids, except for the few that don't have eyelids, and external ears. And then also long tails that can sometimes detach to escape predators. This is a chuckwalla, which is one of our desert lizards, second largest lizard in California. And it's kind of hard to see, but yeah, he's got claws, eyelids, their ear hole is right here, the tail. Not all lizards can drop their tail or lose their tail to escape predators, but that's a common thing a lot of them do. So say like bobcat or something's messing with a lizard, and it'll release part of its tail, and that part of its tail flops around for a little while, even though it's not attached to the lizard. And that can distract the predator while the actual lizard runs away. And they will grow their tail back. It never looks quite as good, you can tell, which I'll point out with some of our pictures. But that's a characteristic of lizards. That's something snakes don't do. In fact, maybe later, I don't know where Glenda went, she might pull out a snake that is a good example of that. So let's see, lizard. Yeah, not all of them do have eyelids. Most of them do. A lot of geckos don't have them, especially like crested geckos, Mediterranean house geckos. I think day geckos too. Things that we don't have here. I didn't bring it, or I don't have it in this presentation. Do you guys have night lizards here at all? Okay, probably not. They're out in the desert more, but they're a lizard that doesn't have eyelids. Oh yes, cloaca is a multi-purpose orifice. So this is a thing that all of our lizards, also snakes and tortoises, they kind of have a one hole for all the things. For poop, for pooping, this is lovely whiptail taking a poop, and 2 whiptails just going at it. So in a lot of lizard species, you could tell the males and the females because males have these pores that they use. They're usually a lot bigger than on a female, and that's for marking scents and everything. And there's bulges at their tail because they're called hemipenes. There's 2 of them. I guess either side you get on the female, you have something to get the job done. So that's snakes and lizards. Yeah, they have 2. And this is a picture of a lizard poop, because if you're out on the trail showing kids stuff, poop is always a hit.
I'm gonna be a kid.
Yes.
Is the poop pooping white?
No, that's the pee. That's the urates, yeah. So with lizard poop, it'll be dark, and then it'll have a little white thing on the end, and that's the pee and that's the poop. So.
At the same time.
Yep, at the same time, they'll just do both of it. Yeah, so things go in and things go out of that cloaca on their underside. So we'll start with the most common lizard everyone talks about, the western fence lizard. They're also called blue bellies because they have super bright blue bellies. Males do, at least. They do push-ups. You'll see them kind of bobbing their head and doing push-ups. And the reason they do that, it's basically kind of a threat display, a territorial display, them showing off to other lizards or animals. This is my rock, my fence. Fight me. And one of the coolest things about them, though, is they have something in their blood that a bacterium, or it kills the bacterium that causes Lyme disease. So if a tick feeds on a fence lizard, it gets rid of that thing that would cause Lyme disease, which is why one of the reasons why it might be not as common here on the West Coast as the East Coast. So that's, I know, right? Yeah, so that's one thing I read that's really fascinating about them.
Has that been used in any sort of Lyme disease treatment or anything to do this?
Probably. I'm sure they've done research or something because, yeah, there's a lot of research that would benefit us that we can get from reptiles. That'll talk about a couple of them. But yeah, they hang out on rocks, fences, buildings. They're pretty common, so if anybody sees a lizard, it might be this other lizard. It would be the side blotch lizard. They have this little blotch on their side. This is a male and this is a female. So the males kind of can get orange, red, all kinds of pretty colors during breeding season. Same with the fence lizard. The females are just kind of brown and stripy. I know, it's crazy. I'm glad I had a picture two together. But and the males, I don't know all the details of it, but they have this very complex throat color hierarchy, breeding rights thing that goes on with their colors, which, yeah, I'm not going to elaborate on because I have not researched it. But yeah, if you're ever on the trail and you see a lizard just running around on the ground, it's probably a side blotch lizard. If it's up kind of on a tree or something, or even the building here, might be a fence lizard. So some of these lizards, I mentioned with the tuatara, they do have that third eye on the top of their head. A lot of like fence lizard and side blotch lizards have that too. It's very covered with scales. It's more visible when they're younger, but that's something that they also have. I think horned lizards do too.
Sea stars. Sea stars.
Oh, they have one like that too?
Those at the end of their,
Oh, that's cool.
They can detect shadows.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, main thing is detect shadows, like kind of, it helps with their circadian rhythm. And yeah, it's not super, they can't really see out of it, but like say they're sitting there, like they might notice if a predator's overhead. Yes?
Do we know whether it's evolving into a third eye or from a third eye? Like, is it getting rid of a third eye from way back, or is it starting to get
I think it's starting to get one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so, because I don't think there's anything that's had like a fully developed third eye in fossil record that we know about, at least now. So yeah, I think it's moving more towards that. Yeah, I don't know all the details about this, but I wanted to mention it because that's a weird, crazy thing that.
So they only have one eye?
They have their two eyes on the side and then the one on the top. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Western whiptail. This is another common lizard we have here in the area. They're always on the ground. They're fast, and you'll see them in leaf litter, and they move like really kind of jerky, like a creepy stop motion puppet or something. And they're kind of always looking for stuff and like digging, and they love the leaf litter. Actually, one of my funniest encounters with one of these was I was going through somewhere, hiking on the trail, and I startled one, and he dropped a scorpion that he had caught. And he was kind of like looking at me, looking at the scorpion, kind of like debating it. And then he ran over, grabbed a scorpion, and then ran. I'm like, okay, good. I didn't want to make you lose your lunch. But yeah, they're funny, and they're really hard to like see because they're always kind of in the cover, hiding, and they have these lovely spots. Alligator lizards are also, I don't know how many we see here. They're another one that hang out in the leaf litter. You can notice this one's lost his tail at some point. It's regrown here. So it's never quite the same. They actually hang out a lot in urban areas and backyards and stuff. And they get mistaken for snakes a lot because they're this long, skinny lizard. They have tiny little legs, and they kind of move like slithery. So people see this thing going, and they think it's a snake at first. They actually get their name mostly because they have their back and belly scales are reinforced bone like alligators. So that's kind of where they get the alligator name. But they can pack a punch with their bite too. Yeah, they're pretty little chompy, pretty good. In fact, lizards tend to have more bite power than snakes, which we'll get into why snakes don't really need it to grab their prey. So.
If you want to catch one of them and you've got a corner, the best thing to do is get a stick and dangle it, and they'll bite the stick, and then you can grab them.
Oh, that's a good trick. Yeah, some people, like for catching lizards, I'm sure you've seen where you can get like a blade of grass or a piece of fishing line, kind of make a little noose and slip it over their head and then pull up, and you can noose it and then catch a lizard that way. I cannot do that for the life of me, but. And a lot of times I try not to catch lizards because I don't want them to lose their tail, and then I'll feel terrible that they lost their tail, and now they're going to have an ugly tail that comes back that's not as pretty. So a lot of times I don't really mess with lizards unless I'm relocating them. In fact, not too long ago, I was removing some garbage out in the Antelope Valley at one of the sanctuaries, and I lifted up a board, and there was this side blotch lizard. And because it was so cold, he was going there to hibernate, I was able to just pick it up. And then it started warming up, but then I found another dead Joshua tree to put him under. But yeah, it was kind of one of the few times I'm like, wow, this is the first time I've held one of these because I could never catch them. Okay, everybody's a lot of really cool lizard. The horned lizard, they're also called the coast horned lizard. That's the one we have here. The story, like I was told, everyone tells me, is they used to be everywhere. I caught them as kids. They were all over the place, and now you never see them. And that's kind of connected to one of those invasive species stories. They eat only one thing, which is harvester ants. So when you see the mounds with the big red ants, that's their only thing they eat. And there's Argentine ants that have been introduced that are kind of taking over and displacing the harvester ants. So that's part of why we think their numbers have dropped so significantly. Also just loss of habitat. They are kind of, if you see one, they're kind of funny because they're very flat and they can only run a short distance. So they'll run and then they'll stop and they camouflage so well. So you just look, to see one, you'll just see this flat little like pancake thing just going by and you're like, oh, that's one of those guys. Yes?
Is there a reason that they only eat the harvester ants? Were there other natural species of ants that were problematic to them that they decided not to eat?
I don't know. So my guess, I'm just guessing for this, is maybe they said they'll focus on eating this, because the harvester ants they're very acidic, I guess it would be. They don't taste good. Most things do not eat ants because they have a lot of formic acid and they're just not the tastiest. So I think maybe it was they just filled that niche where, hey, nobody else is eating this ant. Let's make this our thing. So it kind of works in that they have one thing and no competition, but then it sucks when that's the one thing and then it's going away. So yeah. They are so they have the horns, they can really, like I've seen videos where they're eating the ants and they just they're like armored going in. The ants are trying to sting and bite and they're just like, nope, coming in and eating them. For defense, they will puff up. Like I've picked some of them up and you'll feel they just inflate. And I have not seen it as much with our local species. I know there's some other species in this family are more apt to do it. They will actually shoot blood out of their eyes at a predator. Yeah, it doesn't affect their eyes. It's like pressure, just gets blood. And I think the blood tastes really bad because of all their acidic ants that they eat. So if you get a mouthful of that, you're like, oh gosh, I'm not gonna eat that. But yeah, really, really cool lizards. Do not take one home as a pet because unless you have a really active harvester ant colony at the same time, you're not going to have anything to feed them. They will not eat crickets. They will not eat anything, mealworms, anything that's easy. If you want to have them, you have to have that ant colony. Plus, I think it's illegal to have them anyway.
And they're still pretty plentiful if you want to see them near Pine Mountain.
Oh, I saw one up the hillside trail a couple months ago when I was hiking. But I have a replica of one. I'll just have this out later. You can look closer if you want. This is not a local species. This is a regal horned lizard that's in Arizona. But I kind of recreated them eating ants. There's little ants on here too because lizards weren't small enough. And this is kind of like how the ants' burrows look too. They have these big rocks all around that they use and dig up and just throw on the outside. So kind of a fun thing. Horned lizards are super cool. Oh, actually, and you could see that third eye on this one. I painted that in. I forgot about that. So, oh, here's a comparison. So this is a big one. These were both at Devil's Punch Bowl when I worked there. This is a newborn baby. Look how cute it is. I had a quarter because I wanted to show the size. And then that's like, yeah, that was a big adult and it had this yellow chin. I think it was like just a big male. It was, wait, where? Oh yeah, on my my arm. Yeah, yep. Oh, so then this one, here's something that's not brown. This is a western skink. They're not super common here. They're another thing that hangs out in the leaf litter. I've seen them up at Walker Ranch. And they have this blue tail because they use it as part of that distraction from predators. It'll flail around and it's bright. It's like bright metallic blue. Like pictures don't do it justice. When you see it in hand, you're like, oh my God, how is this lizard this color? And they kind of lose it as they get older, but yeah, it's amazing. I've caught one, I think it must have been a baby. It was like that big in a black widow web under Frank's desk when I worked here. That's one of my memories with them was like, I saw this little lizard in it. I'm like, oh my God, there's a skink in this black widow web. So I scooped it up and I just put it back behind there. So they're around. If you find one, you're lucky. And yeah, they've got that fabulous blue tail. Okay, this is another weird one. It's a legless lizard, not a snake. What the heck is going on? They're their own weird family, I guess. And they're not a snake, even though they don't have legs, because they have an eyelid. They kind of have these little, let's see. Oh, they have ear holes too. Eyes and ear, or eyelids that close and ear holes. And I don't have a picture of one underneath. They have like, most of this is tail, like, cause their cloaca is right past that is their tail. So when I had one specimen in hand, it was like its tail was right there. Oh my God, I couldn't even tell which end was the head. I was like, what's going on? But yeah, these guys, not super common. When I've had people ask me about them, or they usually mention digging, because they hang out a lot underground. So if you're digging, you might be like, oh my God, what is this weird thing? And if you do see them, it's usually a warm evening and around leaf litter. Sometimes pets find them and bring them in. They're like, that's the thing. Yes?
Do they lose whatever it is their tail is?
I think they can. Yeah, I think they can. I've found a few pictures of them where they lost their tail. I didn't include that, but yeah, they can lose part of their tail.
Do they move like a snake, or do they just...
They kind of move like a snake. I've never seen one move because I've never seen one alive.
The snakes on their belly,
They kind of do that inching thing?
Yeah.
I think they do kind of like this motion to propel themselves versus that kind of, yeah, I forget what it's called when they do that.
Olivia?
Yes?
On the subject of losing your tails, can they do that more than once, or is it one time?
No, they can do it more than once. It just keeps looking worse and worse as they keep having that happen.
How long does it take to grow back?
I think it would probably depend on the species and how well, like how many resources they have, like how well they're eating. Like if they have abundant food, they can spend more of that to grow that tail back, versus if they're not getting as much food, they're using that just to keep themselves alive, and tail's like not first priority. So it can take a while, I think. They're silvery. They're reflecting. They have a yellow kind of underbelly. I have a replica of them that I'm working on, but I haven't painted it.
A large silver worm.
I don't think I have it included in this presentation. There's another snake called a western blind snake that literally looks like it's like pinkish and it looks like a worm, but it's a snake that lives underground. And same thing, they're usually seen if they're above ground in the summer. So there's all kinds of weird reptiles in the underground. Snakes, lots of species, second to lizards as far as family groups. They have scales, no legs, except for some boa species that have vestigial legs. They're basically little nubbins that are on the side that you can barely see. So I guess it's not really a leg. No eyelids. No snakes have eyelids, and no external ears. So they can hear to some degree, but it's not as well as like a frog. Frogs hear really well. So they lay eggs, but occasionally there are some species that do retain those eggs in their body, and then when the babies hatch, then they come out, so it looks like a live birth. Great sense of smell. They have a forked tongue. You'll see them when they're flicking it out. That's them just kind of tasting air particles, seeing if there's food, danger, what's going on. And that goes to called the Jacobson's organ that processes what the scent particles are. And a lot of animals have that too. It's not like a unique thing to snakes. In fact, if you've seen I think horses do it a lot, and they'll kind of lift up their lip and kind of do this thing, and that's a similar thing, getting sent to their Jacobson's organ to phlegm. Yes. So it's kind of, I think that is associated with that too. Yeah. Yeah, you'll see them make that face.
You can actually taste wine better that way too.
Wait, what? Oh, doing that?
Wine.
Okay, I'm going to try that next time I go tasting and look really weird.
Pulling the air in over the wine.
Oh.
You have sense of smell up in the back of your throat too.
Oh, that's cool.
It's a wine.
Yeah.
A wine class.
So yeah, some of the things that snakes have. Snakes do not grow their tail back. In fact, we have one snake that we'll probably, maybe we can bring out a little later. It's a rosy boa, which is kind of a rare snake in this area, but she's missing her tail. And a lot of times that species will kind of, it's like a 50-50 chance with a predator. Go for my head, go for my tail. And if they go for the tail, yeah, you live, but you don't have a tail anymore. And then head, you're done for. So yeah, they don't grow their tails back. The most common snake in the area would be the gopher snake. They're also probably our longest, biggest snake. They can get 6 feet like max in this area. I've never seen one that big, but it exists. They eat mostly mammals, but they'll eat anything, other reptiles, eggs, birds. I know there's been instances, I think here I saw there was a house finch nest on the building and a gopher snake went in and it was just, I don't know if they were baby birds or eggs, but it was just munching away at whatever was in there. I'll have it out later. I have a replica, actually. So snakes don't have super strong jaws for chewing, but they do have mouths that can swallow things way bigger than them. Their jaw doesn't really unhinge. It's just that there's like an extra kind of like bone here that allows them to open it, and their bottom jaw is not connected down the middle like ours. It just sticks out, so they can kind of just do this and bring it in and slowly work prey in. It's really crazy to watch them eat. But I have a replica of a gopher snake eating a gopher that I made years ago.
What beetle is that?
Oh, that is a diabolical ironclad beetle. Yeah, everything I do, I have to include an insect of some kind on, because that's my trademark. But yeah, I made that to kind of illustrate them stretching their mouth and eating. It's kind of like what's going on over there. We have a gopher snake going in, looking at a gopher that's like about to be eaten. They're the ones that are most commonly confused with rattlesnakes, which I'll have some comparison pictures later. Yeah, actually, so a lot of snakes will shake their tail regardless of if they have a rattle or not. It's a nervous response. I don't know if it's exactly them saying, I'm pretending to be a rattlesnake. I think it's just what they do when they're nervous to kind of warn things, and the rattlesnakes have just happened to evolve to have a nice little rattle on the end. But yeah, they'll shake their heads. They'll widen their head and kind of flatten it too. So it's kind of like, wait, is that a gopher snake or a rattlesnake? So they kind of make it a little tricky. But one thing, like, of course, you probably don't want to get this close. They have rounded pupils, whereas a rattlesnake gets slit like a cat. And so that's another thing. Let's see. Yes, their tail always comes to a point. Rattlesnakes, it either comes to a rattle or it's just blunt. I've seen that a few times where I don't know what happened. The rattlesnake had gotten into a situation and lost his rattle. So it does happen. Another thing that's kind of interesting about snakes and most lizards, they don't have vocalization. Snakes will just kind of inhale air and then exhale, and that makes like a noise. So that's not a vocal cords or anything making that sound. A lot of lizards too, they'll kind of huff and hiss and expel air. Geckos are one of the few species of lizard groups that can make noises, just like little like chirps. And if you've ever heard, like, they're called tokay geckos. They're out, I forget where they're from, but they got their name because it sounds like they're saying tokay, tokay, like a Pokemon saying its name. So yes.
Where I live,
Oh. They maybe, but they're not as inclined to eat rattlesnakes as.
Do the rattlesnakes eat
Oh, not really. No, I think they mostly, rattlesnakes are pretty focused on mammals because of their heat sensing pits that can sense warm-blooded animals. But yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, so these guys, I don't think they'd go for rattlesnakes. Rattlesnakes wouldn't go for them. I think at the LA Zoo they have 2 of them in the same habitat. At least they did last time I was there. So. Oh, okay, maybe that's it. But yeah, so they are fine with rattlesnakes. This is the one that rattlesnakes need to worry about. Because king snakes, they call them the king because they will eat other snakes. Like king cobras in India, they eat other snakes. That's kind of like why they call them the king. This is our one in our area. They are very voracious eaters. Anything that fits in their mouth, they will eat it. They are immune to rattlesnake venom. And they have really, like compared to their size, they have the strongest constriction power because they eat so many reptiles. And when they constrict, say, mammals, like if it's a rodent, that has to breathe. And every time they exhale, they go tighter until the thing can't breathe, and then it dies, and then they start eating it. And with king snakes, though, since they eat so many reptiles, their respiration's a little different. So it takes longer for them to suffocate a reptile. So they really squeeze it like crazy. So yeah, both the gopher snake and king snake are constrictors. And that's part of why they don't really have a very powerful bite as much. They can bite. Anything with a mouth can bite is what I always say. But if you're bit by a king snake or a gopher snake, it might be a pinch, but they're not gonna really like grab, like press hard. They have teeth that will kind of get into your skin and it'll look like a tiny little mouth bit you because it's really funny.
I had someone use an example of getting bit by a snake versus getting bit by a kitten.
Oh.
And that supposedly the kitten was a stronger bite.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And sharper.
Yes,
But the
yeah.
snake doesn't want to let go of it.
Yeah, sometimes, especially a food-motivated snake like a king snake might just be like, oh, this is warm, can I fit it in my mouth? They're kind of dumb like that. They'll sometimes bite their own tail and you're like, that's not food. They're just food motivated. All they think about is food, I want to eat it, can I fit this in my mouth? Is this food? Let's eat it. So they get a little crazy when it comes to food. But yeah, their bite is mostly just to grab their prey, and then they start constricting. So that bite doesn't need to chew or hurt it. That's not how it's killing the prey. It's just to hold it in one place till they can get their body around it and then constrict it. Here's a lovely picture of a king snake eating a rattlesnake. So, yeah.
So how does it kill its prey? Is it constricting it to death? Or?
I think it's constricting it to death. I need to watch like a whole video of it because I still wonder how they can get that whole long thing down another long thing. Like, I don't know. It's weird.
Once you get the head, the rattlesnake's probably.
Yeah.
Once you get inside, too.
Yeah, although I have heard stories of, I don't know if it was here, I've heard stories where like an alligator lizard was eaten by a king snake and it ate its way out down the throat. Okay, I thought it happened here, which that sounds horrifying. But so yeah, they'll eat rattlesnakes. And this is actually kind of, I don't know, this is one of the snakes that was here years ago. It's kind of more of a dark brown and a white cream. And this one's more kind of chocolate brown and yellowy. So they really can vary colors wise. Some of them have like stripes. Like, I don't know if you still have that one here.
No, I know what you're talking about, the vertical.
Yes.
Vertical stripe is beautiful.
Yeah, so they have a lot of different color variations. There's albino ones you can see at pet expos and stuff.
Snakeskin boots and stuff are made out of? Because it looks kind of similar to those kinds of patterns.
I think most of the snakeskin boots are from python, reticulated pythons a lot. But they have like kind of that sort of patch thing too, and because they're a bigger snake, so they can make bigger boots out of them. But yeah, they can.
Rattlesnakes make good belts.
Just the whole snake?
When you're in Texas.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if I can fit, because our rattlesnakes here are not super big. I don't know if I'd fit one. So, and then there's the California mountain king snake, which we have one right there. You can see him later. They have red mixed in. And these guys people will sometimes confuse with coral snakes. But the little rhyme is, if red touches yellow, kills a fellow. Red touches black, you're okay, Jack. So you can see, although this isn't yellow, it's actually pretty white. Some of them are more yellow than others. The red and the white and the red are not touching. So that's kind of a general rule. We don't have coral snakes here in California. There is a species in Arizona, though, and they're kind of more in the south. They are venomous. These guys are not. In fact, the first snake I was ever bit by was one of these. But I didn't even know it bit me because it had such a tiny mouth. I'm like, what are you holding on to? Oh, my arm. Like, it was so small, it's just like, but yeah, if you see one of these, like, consider yourself lucky. They're pretty rare and secretive. They like canyons. Probably the waterfall trail would be like habitat.
That's where I've seen them on the waterfall.
Oh, okay, cool.
The only place I've seen them in Class Rita.
Oh, I remember years ago one of the staff found one, or somebody reported one. It was in the parking lot, like, which is crazy. So keep an eye out. Maybe you'll see one of these cool guys. Yes?
I've seen about 50-50 actually with California king snake and California mountain king snake at Towsley.
Really?
They come out on overcast days just before rain.
Oh.
You're not going to see them on a sunny day because they're, they don't like that.
That is cool that they're at Towsley.
And so
Oh.
it's about 50-50, and it's like in the books, the beginning, we were talking about Brian before,
Yeah.
and when I've seen things, I've taken pictures and sent it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, they're not supposed to be in that area.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody had it as a pet and let it go. And
Could be. That, yeah, because so there is, I don't think you can legally have these as pets, or I've never seen them for sale in California. You can get the Arizona mountain king snake, which has a little more white on its head. But yeah, really beautiful snakes, good eaters. King snakes are always lovely. This is probably one of the most common snakes I see now, even more than gopher snakes. I don't know about you guys. It's called a striped racer. It's a skinny, skinny little snake. It's just, and when you see it, it's mostly just this little black thing going into a bush. If you're lucky, you'll see its face, maybe. Like this one was just hanging out in a bush, so I was able to get close and get a picture. But they're very fast, and they will sometimes actually hold their head up kind of like this and be kind of looking, because they have big eyes for the size of their head, and they're lizard hunters. So they're kind of out looking, keeping their head up, looking for movement. And they're not constrictors, which I'll show you how I learned that in a few slides. They are just grab it and just get it down. So, and they're fast. If you do manage to catch one, I hear they will they're not venomous, but they'll just freaking nail you a bunch of times, just be like, let me go. But they're so fast, like, you're lucky if you get a picture, have enough time to get your camera out to take a picture, and if you do, you might just get the tail. So, but they're really neat little snakes, non-threatening. Kids will point them out. Yeah, you had a handleable one, which was so cool.
But she was still a very, very, one of the most active snakes
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah, typically they're not advised for captivity because they're so active like that, and usually they're not super friendly either. And then there's the red racer, also called the red coach whip. This is a big red snake. When they're younger, they're kind of more of like a brownish orange. They have like a dark spot behind their head. And same thing as the striped racers, they'll kind of hold their head up, look around, go after lizards. And yeah, one time I saw one of these when I lived in Santa Clarita. There was one in my yard, basically fighting with this alligator lizard to the death. And I filmed it, I have a video of it somewhere. It was like a half hour, or like 17 minutes when I cut it down. But yeah, I just watched this alligator lizard trying to escape, this snake coming after it, and them just wrestling each other. And this is actually a picture from it. Like you can see he's biting that, and this one's biting the snake. It was just to the death. And like the alligator lizard had lost his tail, and it was kind of bleeding. That's why the flies were coming in, because they're like, oh, something dead? Can we eat it? So it was very violent. So yeah, I remember I came in because I was volunteering here, and I was like, I thought they were constrictors. This thing didn't constrict. They were just wrestling, and it's like, nope. Oh, the snake won. Yeah, the snake won. He got the lizard down.
They ate things from the head down because of the legs. I thought they ingested things from the head down because of the legs. That looks like it went from the tail up.
Oh, actually, no. I thought that too. This is his leg. So this is just the head of the lizard, and his body's like here. So he's kind of wrapped around.
I can't see that point.
Yeah. So this is an arm. The snake's biting him like right here, and the little arm is like there. Yeah. Typically, it's best to swallow head first, especially like with rodents, because then the arms are generally just go down, whereas if you do it bottom first, then you gotta go around the arms and stuff, which I've seen some king snakes, they're just so hungry, they're like, I don't even need it in position, just get it down. And we're like, that's making it harder on yourself, snake, eat it head first. Yes?
Is the red coach whip the same as just the red racers?
Yeah.
Because I've had red racers here. In fact, there was one in my yard, and then about a week and a half later, it was in Ian's yard.
Oh.
2 doors down. But it was so beautiful, it looked like brocade. It looked like red brocade. It was a very large one. And then its head was probably about 10 inches from the head on down was black.
The dark, yeah.
But it was like black brocade and red brocade. It was amazing.
Yeah, they are beautiful. I've seen some that are like shades of like pink almost. They're, yeah, really, really pretty. But also same thing, if you do manage to catch one, it will bite you a lot. This is a snake. I don't know if any of you guys who've been here a while have seen one of these. This is a ringneck snake. They're small. They tend to hang out near like under another thing, leaf litter under rocks. And they eat mostly small amphibians and like invertebrates like worms and slugs. And they actually are venomous, but it's not a danger to us humans. They have, it's called rear fangs. So farther back in their mouth, they have something that will deliver some venom. It's not like an injection like a rattlesnake, and they really kind of have to kind of grind and sort of work it into their prey to get it to start actually working. You probably wouldn't have to worry about that as a human because he would not be able to even get his mouth around anything really to even do that, but it's not dangerous. And one of the cool things with them is they will kind of show this yellow underbelly and like corkscrew their tail so it looks like a little red thing. And that's those colors. A lot of animals will used to be like, I am dangerous. Do not eat. Look at, I am the not tasty good colors. I am red, and kind of like how monarchs are with, I do not taste good because I am orange. Do not eat me.
That's another one, Olivia, we said on the waterfall track.
Yeah, have you seen these?
Yeah,
okay.
Waterfall trip.
Yeah, I figured some of them have to have been seen here. I've never seen one. And then everybody's favorite, okay, rattlesnakes. This will be the long area. Here in Placerita Canyon, we have the southern Pacific rattlesnake. It is a subspecies of the western rattlesnake. That's the only one. If you go out into the desert more, you can get the Mojave rattlesnake, which we have one on display over there, or the Sidewinder rattlesnake, which is the coolest rattlesnake. This is the only snake, or rattlesnakes are the only snakes in California you need to worry about as a human. If you get bit, you go to the hospital, but it's pretty rare to get bit, and deaths from rattlesnake bites are like very, very rare as well, like maybe single digits in the whole United States, because we have treatment. If you go to the hospital, you can get antivenin and you'll recover. Of course, you'll have a nice, probably big medical bill and stuff, because I forget how much it is per vial of the antivenin. Because to make that,
It went up because the venom, the anti-venom, is now a mixture of that works against not just the Southern Pacific, but the Mojave and the red.
Oh.
So they mixed them together.
Oh.
So they're even more expensive now.
Oh, yeah, because usually it'd be like, what snake were you bit by? Okay, there's this one, because each one has its own unique venom. So it sounds like they made one that's kind of one size. Yeah. Yeah, so I've had, like working at the parks, I've had people say like, do you have antivenin here if I get bit? It's like, no, that's like a huge medical facility will get that. It's expensive.
One of my
Oh.
And they had to airlift him out because he immediately went into whatever.
Oh gosh.
It's a neurotoxin, and it's also
Hemotoxin.
anticoagulant.
Yeah.
Yes. And it took 3 vials of venom
Ooh.
stabilized, and then he was in the hospital for a few days.
Wow. Yeah, it's no joke. Yes.
So how long do you have? Did you get bit like this?
So it varies. It depends on where you were bit, how much venom it injected, what type of snake it was. So like, for example, if you were bit like on the leg or the arm by Southern Pacific, you can get to the hospital and be okay. I heard of a story, I don't know if it's true, where a guy had one by the tail. He was swinging around and the snake went around and got him in the neck, and his neck swelled and he died of suffocation. I know that happened, I think, to a dog here a couple years ago. Unfortunately, it got bit in the tongue and its tongue swelled and it suffocated from that, not even the venom. So anything around your neck and causing suffocation is like worse than like your arm and your leg. Yes?
I think it's an urban legend, but I heard that at the bite site, you can cut it open and suck the venom out.
No, do not do that. Yeah, so it's funny because, yeah, the best thing, it's best to just, like those snake bite kits or sucking out, like, you're gonna probably cause more of an issue cutting open your skin and maybe hitting some artery or who knows, something worse. And tourniquets, the problem with them is, say you're like bit on the arm, if you tourniquet it, it doesn't spread to your other body, but it really starts concentrating in your arm and doing way more damage on just that space. So they say the best thing to do, get to the hospital, remain as calm as you can. If it's like, say you're bit in your arm, keep it above your heart so it spreads a little slower. But yeah, it's just the hospital. Don't try to like...
But you're not close to a hospital, like if you're hiking and there's nothing around you, what would be the best advice?
I knew one guy that got bit and he like he went out of the hiking trail and drove himself to the hospital and stuff. Like with our Southern Pacific, you probably have, I mean, the faster you get to the hospital, the less like damage you'll have. But if you left it like untreated for days, then you would die. So you have some time, unless you have a bad reaction like it sounds like your friend's husband had. Yes?
Probably the most likely to get bit by a rattlesnake is people walking their dogs. I was with a friend and we were walking her 2 dogs, and her first dog got bit by the rattlesnake. But a lot of the bites are dry bites because they know that, you know, they're not going to be needing this animal. It was more because they were scared.
Yeah.
But still, if your dog got bit, you know, we carried the dog back and immediately it went to the vet.
Yeah.
My dog has been through the rattlesnake awareness clinics, and they really work.
Okay, I was going to say that was successful.
Not so, I mean, of course it protects the dog, but it protects you because he's reacting.
Yeah, the dog will probably see it before you do.
Yeah. And the dog's detected by smell.
Yes.
So if a neurotoxic bite is the deadly bite, how does a hemotoxic bite kill you?
It just starts coagulating. Like, I wish I could insert videos. I saw one where I don't know what kind of snake venom it was. They had like a little cup of blood and then they injected the venom in. It just instantly turned to jello. It was like, oh gosh, your blood just starts getting thick and nasty. And
So your heart stops?
if it gets to your heart.
No, I mean if your blood gets too thick, your heart won't pump.
Yeah, that's true. If it would probably take a lot to like go through your whole body, but yeah, it would thicken all that up. And then also like infection's another big thing, and tissue damage. You'll start rotting if it's left untreated. And yeah, that's true. Venom, it's first to dispatch prey, second to fight off something that's trying to hurt the snake. It's actually like the first step in digesting. So rattlesnakes they're called pit vipers because they have 2 kind of little pits right on their nose. I have a replica I can pull out that shows it better, or you can just look real close to them.
One more story.
Oh yeah.
I came out to walk the dog, and we were walking on the edge of my property, and I heard a rattling, or not a rattling, but a rustling down in the. I looked over the edge, and there's this huge bobcat with like a 4-foot rattlesnake in its mouth, and the snake's going like this, And then he drags the snake on down the street.
Oh, wow.
It was so cool.
That is so cool. Yeah, there's another video of, it was a bobcat and there's a snake. It's like in like the street in Arizona, and the cat's doing the cat thing, like batting at it, snake's striking, and the cat's totally just wearing the snake down, because rattlesnakes are kind of big, chunky snakes. They're kind of not, they get worn out pretty quick. They're not super like athletic or anything. So once they're worn out, they're not as fast, and then the cat went around, grabbed it behind the neck, and then just was like, oh, thanks, this is mine now. So red-tailed hawks will do the same thing. I saw one video where it like spread its wings. So the snake struck at the feathers, and then it just grabbed in with its talons and got it behind the neck. Roadrunners will do this tag team thing where they'll distract it and just tire it out. So that's kind of a tactic to the predators with the rattlesnake. Somebody have? Yes?
Become very high in the air and drop. And it kills them, and then that will pick them up.
That's a great method if you don't want to have to deal with that. There's like so many things with rattlesnakes, I lost my train of thought.
While you have that picture up there, the number of rattles, I think there's a myth that people think.
Yes, I know.
Talk about that.
There's so many rattle myths. So every time they shed their skin, they get a new little segment on their rattle. It's not, oh, hold on, let me grab my, oh, here, I'll grab all three of these. Set them here. So every time, this is a kind of beat up one that I found over at Vasquez. This is the rattle. I can't shake it enough to make the sound like they do, because they do it super crazy fast. But every time they shed their skin, they get a new one of these little segments. And this is just like keratin. It's super delicate. You guys can come up and feel this one and kind of hold it and look at it closer. You could see where it's kind of worn down too. And because their segments just kind of sit within each other and yeah, make the noise. There's no like seeds or anything inside. It's just segments. It's not like a maraca. But yeah, every time they shed their skin, they get a new one. And a lot of snakes shed their skin multiple times a year. So every year, you can't tell their age or anything, because they can say it's a snake that's eating really well, it's growing faster. It is going to have a lot more rattles than kind of like the story Renee shared with the gopher snake that wasn't maybe eating quite as often and was not as big. So yeah, different ages, it doesn't matter. Plus they break. Like this one, it's broken off. It probably, if it was, it'd be like that much longer if it kept every single one. So
Olivia, you could say that looking at the number of segments, you could say it's at least 8 years old, or is it it's at least.
That's true. Yeah, you could be like, oh, it's got 8 or 9, so it's got to be.
That old, right?
Well, if it breaks it off too, like I've seen it where they break off and then they just have 2, and you're like,
Right.
you look, yeah. But I have another replica. This was a baby rattlesnake that was actually born here at Placerita in that display. None of the babies lived, but I got one of them and made a replica off of it, and it's got one tiny little nubbin. So you can see kind of what they start with, and that doesn't make a noise at first. So when they're really tiny little babies, it's not going to make much of a sound. Yes?
Is there any like held in captivity world records of mega rattles?
Oh, I should have added a picture. I have seen one of a captive rattlesnake. Its rattle was like that long. I think he even said like, oh, it broke, and I just kind of like glued it back on. Like, no, but they're fragile. So when they get to a certain point, it just falls off. But yeah, yes.
Could you please dispel the myths that we see on Facebook when they'll show like these 10-foot rattlesnakes or these huge things?
Yes.
They don't exist, and that it's just Photoshop.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Of course, the magical, you can't believe everything on the internet, believe it or not. The magical thing with Photoshop is you can also do it. Also, like people will have their snake on a hook, they'll be holding it up, and then like if the camera's there, perspective's different, so it'll look bigger. I mean, rattlesnakes do get pretty big. Eastern diamondback rattlesnakes are ginormous. The shed I had out earlier was from our animal keeper's Western diamondback, and she is ginormous. So, but Southern Pacifics, I think they probably would max out at about 4 feet. But
Is the pattern always the same?
it can vary. Actually, that's kind of something I want to make eventually. They vary so much in color. Even the babies, like babies typically are kind of very contrasty with their little diamond spots than the adults that kind of get a little more kind of a mottled color. And I've seen some that are like very brown. Like this replica that I have is a very brown colored one, but they can be gray. I've seen it where like the diamond patterns are really light and almost have like a pinkish hue. Like it's amazing the color variation in rattlesnakes. Oh, the black, I was just gonna say the black ones are really cool. They had one, I think it was at the Living Desert Museum. They had a melanistic or almost melanistic Southern Pacific. It was just solid black. So yeah, there's always some weird color variations, but I would love to like make a whole row of replicas to show all the colors just this species comes in. Because yeah, it's all over the place. Another myth, since we're gonna talk about myths, is people will say, oh, baby rattlesnakes are more dangerous because they can't control their venom and they just fire it all at once. And that's not really true. First of all, they have itty bitty amounts of venom. So he'd have just a little bit in those glands, which are located behind the head, versus an adult that's got a lot more venom there. And it's not that they don't know how to control their venom. It's kind of just how much they decide to give you if they bite you. So yeah, the venom first and foremost is the starting of the digestive process on their prey. Then if they really have to, they'll use it to defend themselves. But they would rather save that for their next meal because actually we just looked it up this morning. It could be days to like weeks for them to replenish that venom. It doesn't just refill really quick. So they're not super keen to use it on something that is not food. And they don't see us as food. We're too big. They know that. They know they're not going to try to eat us. Yes?
I have a question. One time we went hiking in Los Leones, and we was coming down, and a lot of hikers were going up. Everybody stopped because it was a big rattlesnake crossing the fire road, but it was so slow. Everybody was standing watching it, what's going on. But so slow, so everybody was saying because she was too old. And I said maybe because she just ate and it can't go fast. So what was that?
It could be all the above. Yeah, it could be older. Although I have at a 30-plus-year-old Mojave rattlesnake who she is fast with her food. So, but sometimes it could be. Yeah, they could have just eaten. It might have been cold day, especially on trails. They really like to go on trails or the road because rattlesnakes, they like to come out at night. I see more at night than during the day, just myself personally. Maybe it's because I live out in the desert and it's too hot. But yeah, in the evening, it gets dark. They like to eat a lot of the kangaroo rats, so they'll go out on the pavement to warm themselves up. So, and then I have to chase them out of the road. But it could have been that. It could have been like, oh, okay. What time of day was it?
It was like early in the morning.
Oh, okay.
It was coming back, but it was, it was making the little lines, like, so slow. They was for a while we just watching the snake crossing it. And everybody is like, why is it so slow? Because I know they go fast.
Yeah, it was probably just warming up. Like, I've always said, if you want to catch lizards, you got to do it early in the morning before they've warmed up and are fast. Because, yeah, and sometimes they don't want to be bothered. They're like, oh, fine, I'll leave. Like, there was one I was chasing out of the road one night.
Like a very small
Yeah, it's kind of, it's nice.
And you just waiting still, and then people start going and running, but it was suspense, just watching this. So I don't know if it was because it was old or because it ate something and it couldn't.
Yeah, could have been both, or just cold.
Kind of people that could be.
Oh, it had like a big. Yeah. Oh, it might have just eaten, and yeah, I was like, oh, I don't want to. Okay, yes.
So in Sweden we have one viper only. It's
Oh.
the only venomous snake we have, but maybe it's related to this because what I've been taught visiting kindergarten and so on the scouts is that after they spend a lot of time like sunbathing on a rock, they can kind of get sort of blissed out, kind of like dazed out.
Oh.
And they get less vigilant. So they might notice if you sit down next to them, for instance, they'll just be like, yeah, give me that
I could see them doing that, just being like I've had some that are reluctant to, move out of the trail. Might be like, oh, this was the perfect spot. I don't want to leave. But yeah, I could see kind of like if you've ever been in a hot tub, it's like, oh, I'm getting dizzy. I better get out of here. I'm getting too toasty. Because amphibians absorb and get their water through their skin, they're very sensitive to contaminants in the water. Like even our oils would bother them. So if there's like something going on in the water or there's lower amounts of amphibians, it's like, okay, something's going on. So they're kind of like the first thing to look for. They do fluctuate in their populations depending on water. Like right now there's like not a lot of amphibians, but if we had like a bunch of wet years, we'd probably have more like what Sue described with your spadefoot invasion. So they can fluctuate, but yeah, they are kind of a good thing where if you see less of them, it's like, let's see what's going on. Let me look at hold on. I have a couple notes. With medical research, there's a lot to learn. From when lizards regenerate their tails, it's like, why can they do that? So there's some research on like, could we grow limbs, or let's look into them. Sea stars do the same thing too. So it's kind of stuff to learn that they can do that we don't. Gila monsters, they actually use their venom to research and make a diabetes drug and an Alzheimer's drug. So there's some medical uses with venom, which is kind of crazy to think about. And then a lot of snake venom is used in cancer treatment or research to help develop those things. So a lot of really, really good medical research is done from reptiles. They pay on press. Oops, I didn't finish that. So they keep the mice population down. Insects with amphibians, like, oh my God, frogs eat so many mosquitoes. They also are good to be eaten themselves. They feed lots of animals. Humans eat them all over the world. Probably not as much of a food source here. Alligators, actually, I was reading this last night, they were threatened because people were hunting them too much and using their leather and stuff. And so once they started farming them, they had enough for people to have their food and also reestablish in the wild. So they are used for a lot of stuff. And cultural impact. Snakes are in so many cultures and stories and mythology and religious practices and traditions and apparel, like all over the world. Like there's reptiles like in history and culture. So they've definitely made a big impact on humanity as a whole. And most of like the fear with reptiles, I was reading one thing, it's possible that it's like an ancestral thing with snakes, like, because a lot of primates, when they see a snake, just automatically it's like, nope. So maybe it's just deep down we think that long thing with no legs is bad. So that's why a lot of people have a fear of them too. But yeah, so reptiles they're very good, even if you don't like them, they do have their place. Resources, California Herps, this is the best site for any reptile stuff ever. I was using it a lot to make the presentation. Also, if you're on Instagram or Twitter, Dr. Erin McGee, she has hashtag Find That Lizard. Almost every Wednesday, she'll have a picture of somewhere in the environment, and you have to try to find the lizard. And then you scroll over, and you can see where it was, and if you're right. I have spent a long time on some of them just staring at my phone, and my boyfriend will be like, oh, is it lizard time? Because he knows when I'm like, I pull my glasses down, I'm just looking. But she's Afro Herper on Instagram and Twitter. And of course, iNaturalist is the best thing ever. You can put pictures of whatever weird things you find or are interesting, and it's a great resource. So yes, reptiles, yes.
And occasionally you'll find a reptile that does acting.
That does what?
That does acting. The gecko.
No.
Wait. Oh, yes. Yep, they some of them like to sell insurance and stuff, so. I saw it funny, I should have included it in here. It was another type of gecko that's very menacing looking, and I forgot what the tagline on it was. It was like, this is the gecko that tries to convince you not to have insurance or do something, because he was like the opposite. He wasn't a friendly looking day gecko. He was this weird, creepy leaf-tailed gecko or something, but yeah, so I realized we're already at 12:30, so, but I don't think we'd find too many reptiles today because it is not super, like with snakes, it needs to be kind of consistently warm before they're like, okay, let's get up. Lizards, sometimes if it's a warm day, they'll just kind of hang out in their rock until it gets cold and then they'll just hunker down again. But yeah, a couple of weeks maybe we'll start seeing some stuff and hopefully some tadpoles in the pond there. So that'll be exciting. When is the pond? You're doing a pond cleaning soon?
Pond cleaning, Fresno, I think it's in a couple of weeks, but it's during class, unfortunately. So they're not going to be able to participate in that.
Okay, but afterwards it'll be nice and clean and hopefully we'll see the frog and toad eggs in there and we can watch some of them grow because they're pretty neat. Okay, I'm done. That's all. Thank you for hearing me.